Father Peter John Pearson is the director of the Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Office. Father Pearson, good afternoon to you. What do you believe should happen in this? How should we resolve what is actually quite a difficult technical legal issue?
Well, the technicalities are very different, and our approach and participation in this discussion has been around the search to find a technicality and technicalities that synchronize with the kind of moral principles that we have in terms of how participation in democracy works. We want clearly to have the greatest number of voices in the public space, especially where we come from such a diverse community, and not only the heterogeneous nature of our political discourses, but also of our cultural, religious, and all the others. And we want some of the wisdom of that to be incorporated and to have a chance to flourish in legislative and policy spaces. So we want that. And for us, therefore, the corollary of that would be that we have a very fair number. Today, the discussion was largely around numbers. And we would say and feel that the numbers that have been put on and arrived at for independence put quite an unfair burden on them, on people who don't have the kind of machinery and the political kind of experience to bring to their campaigns. So it is for us skewed. And we would also acknowledge that the difficulties that the IC is going to be faced with in making this happen is something that worries us greatly, which is why we didn't venture into any kind of amicus relationship, because there's a fairness that has to pertain to voters as well. Some within our organization were saying we should have done this after. These cases should have been brought after the 24 election, when there would have been more time to conscientize people, to explain the new, quite radical kinds of choices and mechanics that are going to be made. But we would veer very strongly to anything that makes it possible and least burdensome for people to have a voice in Parliament and in the provincial legislatures.
Father Pearson, there are other aspects to this, and part of it is currently our system, as you know, and the sort of basis for the problem is that it's proportional representation. We don't, at this stage, under the system that we that we've used in the past, have a system where you have geographic constituencies. There's a lot of push to have geographic constituencies, like, for example, the UK, like in the US, like in many other countries, Zimbabwe. Do you believe we should do that? It would lead, perhaps, to more accountability, goes the argument. I worry it may not lead to as much more accountability as people think.
We on record as having said we would favor a hybrid system. I don't think first past the post is necessarily going to ensure the representation that we think is at the heart of a democracy. You could have even fewer representatives from other parties, fewer independents. So we would argue more. You mentioned England, Zimbabwe. We would argue more for something akin to the German system, and you know, that's the hybrid system. We do have a sense that proportional representation is important. It does get voices in there who might be completely kind of snuffed out at the first past the post. But we also believe that the accountability that comes from constituency arrangements is important. So we would argue for a hybrid.
Father, you may be a more forgiving soul than I am, and I'm a very cynical soul, I'm afraid. But it seems to me that the political parties in Parliament, which don't want independence, it is not in their interests to have independence, have actually made this act as difficult and, frankly, as impossible as they can. I mean, it seems very unlikely to me that the Constitutional Court will allow it to continue in its current form just because it is unfair. Do we need to be quite careful of the political parties here? Could they be deliberately sabotaging the independence?
Firstly, let me say I rather enjoy the company of cynics. So I'm not put off by that. But I think we do need, as in everything else, Stephen, we need to be wary and on our guard with regard to vested interests, whether it's in the economy, whether it's in the political domain, whether it's in any other area. Vested interests have always safeguard their interests. So we shouldn't be surprised that this is true, but that shouldn't hinder us from exploring and taking steps towards a better model of democracy. That, rather than political party longevity in the public space, is what we need to do.
Father Peter John Pearson, thank you, Director of the Catholic Parliamentary Liaison Office. Really appreciate the time.